So we're here again with Dawn and Kelly. They've just got back from the Sol Foundation Symposium, and we've got a lot of questions. So and they've got a lot to say, I imagine. So
we'll see.
Yeah, but guys, what were your first impressions? Let's start off with that, please.
Well, for me, it was exciting to just see how many people came. I didn't really know. We had over 400 people came, and such a variety of people. And that in itself brings this buzz, of everyone being able to talk about a subject that in other company, they kept saying, I feel so free to bring this up. I don't have to test the waters and see if I can bring it up. So there was that nice openness, which was there. So lots of speakers, over 20 speakers, long days. So much to process as well. But the stars were there. So when I first saw Jacques Vallée, after seeing him here and there, I was like, oh my gosh, it's Jacques Vallée. So I'm not one given into kind of starstruck, but Colonel Nell, oh my gosh, it's Colonel Nell. So for that, it was really nice to see these people who have dedicated so much kind of in person and not just on the screen. So that's just a first broad swipe of the...
Did it meet your expectations, do you think, Kelly?
Not fully. I mean, things could have been organized differently. I mean,
absolutely.
A lot of the presentations could have been done, on YouTube before we come. So I'm more of a researcher. So, all this time was given. Yeah, it's nice. They give a presentation, but I could have seen it on YouTube and then come up with the questions. So I wanted much more a dialogue because the kind of communion this non-human intelligence is trying to have with us, which we call telepathy and all of that, they want this dialogue, but we have to desire it. And if we're constantly avoiding it, as Chaim Michet would say, they're telling him, we're not ready because the desire isn't there. We're not, we have to be willing. They're not going to violate our space and our resistance to talk. We're focusing on whistleblowers, which is part of the movement. I think the legacy group has allowed this to happen, to test the waters for further disclosure. And if you listen to the last subliminal messages, and maybe even more explicit, Colonel Nell said they're pulling back instead of coming forward with more disclosure. And they're blocking legislation because it seems that the dialogue is not going in the direction the legacy group would like it to go. We're focusing on the phenomenon and not looking at the correlations.
Did you get the sense? Oh, sorry to interrupt. Sorry.
Well, I was going to say we're gawking kind of at the phenomenon.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that the mentor of Garry Nolan, something that inspired him, which also actually inspired me to mention it, a phenomenon is just a phenomenon. There's no meaning to the phenomenon unless you see the correlations with the phenomenon. That gives the meaning. And it seems that we're stuck at the phenomenon. We're not looking at the subliminal messages of what they're hoping for us to start talking about. And that was quite visible with Jake Barber's sharing his experience. Yeah. He talks about, of course, the dog whistle, and we're going to prove that I had an experience. I'm going to provide the proof. If it was about proof, the proof doesn't convert. It doesn't create this dialogue that we should be having. That doesn't seem to be happening. So it was very interesting to see this video that Jake Barber showed about a helicopter wanting to chase a UAP. This light.
They were chasing it.
Excuse me. They were chasing it, but the helicopter got blocked. and all the dials, everything got
They had
stuck.
photographs
Yeah,
of
they had
the.
photographs.
It was like
Really?
stuck in. Yeah, they have it all on film. Yeah, it wouldn't let the helicopter get closer.
Wow. Well, I guess we're still in that space where the majority of the world are still looking for proof.
Yes.
So
yes.
they're reacting. I guess they're still reacting to that.
Yeah,
They're not
that's all they saw. That's
Yeah.
all they cared about. And for me, I suffer from this moral clairvoyance. There's these subliminal messages that just jump to me in the face that no one's seeing. That's been I don't know if it's been a experience as a curse in my life, but I realize now it's a blessing. But to see them ignore the subliminal message, what they're telling
Well,
me.
they didn't even pose the question.
question.
Why would we stop? Obviously, it was influence. That wasn't it. It was, again, focused on the phenomenon, not just the next question. Now, why would they want us to stop? They didn't kill us. We didn't crash. We were just kind of in suspended animation till we were released. No question asked about it.
So the answer is, of course, it's very obvious to me, is that we're not going to let you get any closer to give you the absolute proof that you want. Otherwise, we'd have landed down and, we're not going to violate your free will to deny our real presence. There's only a select few. Okay, we're all believers, but, what does it mean, belief? As Colonel Nell says, there's a big difference between believing and knowing, see? And we're resisting the knowing, the dialogue. We're not talking there in that space. Hence, they say we're not ready. So we're all blaming the legacy group, demonizing them, and they're bad people because they won't disclose. And that was outlined by Colonel Nell last year at the Sol conference. And so I asked questions. Well, first of all, I struggled to ask questions. 400 people and all the hands goes up, and I keep trying. And towards the end of the day, the second day towards the end, I forget his name, but he's a moderator for the Sol Foundation, and he picks the hands. And Don and I went to have a private coffee where all they would say the quoi in French,
the organizers.
The organizer. They're all having their private conversations, their personal conversations, that they should be having much more publicly, but they're having it amongst themselves. Anyway, we snuck there just to have a quiet coffee, and so the moderator came by, and I said, tried to make him feel guilty. You never picked my hand. Okay. I won't miss it next time. Okay, you better, because I'll be watching you. A little guilt,
Yeah, right. Oh, good.
And so then I kind of established a relationship. But so then and I learned to, stand outside so I'm more visible to get my questions answered.
What questions did you manage to ask?
Well, one was a presentation by Tim Gallaudet, Admiral Gallaudet, and but it's a question I wanted to ask Colonel Nell, and I went up. I kept asking, and it fell on him. So I mentioned, well, that's I guess the word du jour is synchronicity now that Jung mentioned, and so I said, well, it fell on you. So can you answer this question about Colonel Nell? Why is it being ignored that his concluding remarks recommended that we return to our faith traditions with devotion? That's an astounding statement by someone with his presidential level of security clearance, who knows what's going on behind the scenes, and we don't know really what his connections are with the legacy group, but it must be pretty close, So here he is making these statements through controlled disclosure, of course. In a therapeutic alliance, you can't tell the patient what their problem is. You use controlled disclosure, so he gives history and all of these things that respects our free will to pay attention. No one pays attention. That's why I asked the question, why is it being ignored? Mm-hmm. And Admiral Gallaudet says, well, stutters a bit. And
he's very eloquent.
I'm not going to speculate on what he meant by that, and I didn't get any answer, basically, to my question. It's like he didn't have opinion about it. So he's the one at the forefront about this disclosure movement, and somehow that wasn't noticed, and he's a colleague.
And it passed him by as well.
Well, or at least he didn't want to go there.
Yeah.
So it's possible he knows more than he knows how to handle it with that astuteness, that therapeutic astuteness that Colonel Nell has.
But you're saying that he wasn't ready for that question, so maybe he...
Oh, maybe he wasn't ready. Oh, come on, you can be spontaneous.
It's his life. He's
life,
a speaker. I mean, he's a very, talented professional.
So did anybody else pick up that he wasn't able to answer that? Did you get any kind of conversations?
Well, I joined a psychology discussion group on Signal that they offered at the conference. And there was a psychotherapist, a doctor, who said, you asked two questions and neither of them were really fully answered.
It was the same question to two different people, and neither of them answered. Well,
the second one was to Jeff Nucitelli. That's the Italian pronunciation.
I don't remember how it's...
Nucitelli, I think, would be the American accent.
A whistleblower.
He's a whistleblower.
Experience,
and witnessed, and he testified under oath in Congress. So he's been visible, and it was an act of courage because he wasn't he's a police officer in the security clearance. I can't remember exactly. He sat at our table Friday night at dinner. We had a nice conversation with him, and actually he just spontaneously offered to come on our podcast.
So we have to somehow catch him.
Yeah, he has our contact information. So.
And what was his reply to that question?
Well, at the tabletop conversation, he was sharing his own faith traditions and his colleagues that is consistent with what Colonel Nell was talking about. And even the legacy group is being accused by, Elizondo of being, mixing faith with national security and, demonizing again.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of that demonizing influence as well, unfortunately, with Ross Coulthard, which I have a high respect for him.
Was he there?
No,
he was not. Ross Coulthard was not there.
He was mentioned several times. He's interviewed almost all the top guys.
Yeah.
So just back to your question, because it's interesting that it wasn't answered fully, but it was kind of answered by
Jeff.
Jeff.
Yeah. You got to.
Did you feel it was a sincere answer? What can you?
Well, when you're in a private conversation at a tabletop conversation, you feel much freer to share your personal faith and things like that.
So let's not go with that because that's a private conversation.
In a public context, I think he was much more subdued, where this doctor and psychologist felt he really didn't fully answer my question.
So that seems to be a bit of a theme, that people aren't going there still. And this is a major symposium of all the sort of the major thinkers in this space, that people aren't going there. How do you feel about that?
Well, I think what I found interesting, because he's much more embroiled in the whole thing, is that I can't even remember how many times I heard from the different speakers, we need to hear from the experiencers more, the idea of consciousness. And although it's said, the only speakers who spoke specifically to the psychology of things were on the last day. One speaker, a female, a woman who's a psychologist and works with helping people debrief them in a way from the overwhelming experiences they have had. And then Jeff, who spoke in the end, who talked about very personal experience he had and meaningful experience he had. So they talk about it, but they don't allow it in the speakers.
So some people are delving into the meaning,
Yes.
Which is where your main argument is coming from.
Yes.
And yet you're saying that they're asking to know from the experiencers. Why? Just to get evidence, but not to understand.
I think it's more to get evidence. Well, for me, it posed the question: why do they want to hear from the experiencers? They certainly have Jacques Vallée, who, although was very transparent about how moving the experience was, when he spoke at the conference, he only spoke basically about his excitement and the mechanics of Skywatcher. He didn't talk about his own meaningful experience. So, and again, it's at the end, and you have, this. So I feel, I suppose also as a psychologist, there's a resistance in the whole community. The words are one thing, but their actions are not demonstrating that meaning is important for them by their choice of speakers. Out of 20 speakers, they have only a couple who talk about that. So this was an ongoing frustration with many people we spoke to.
Do you want to answer that?
On the other hand, as a
Yeah.
counter argument,
Yeah.
I can understand why there could be some hesitations, because a lot of these experiencers, can be all over the map, and if they're trying to establish credibility in this colloquy,
yeah.
you want it to be in a language that I assume that gives a sense of professionalism, or some gravitas, some academic background, where there's some rigorous academic thought that's looking at these experiences, and so many of these experiences require interdisciplinary integration,
Mm-hmm.
and there's few people around who are expert psychologists, theologians, or have integrated this interdimensional type of world because it's been denied, basically, as part of the problem. So where do you find people who can speak to an academic community, which generally that's where you start from the top in the way this world works? I mean, there is a shift now, but to come down into the lay language. So it's a challenge to speak to two audiences, the academic audience and the lay audience. And I think it's very important to make that bridge, because when you really understand what you're talking about, you integrate, you make that bridge. And a lot of experiencers have had genuine experiences, but they haven't gone through that integration process to make the connections between the lay language and the academic language. So I think that's part of the problem. I suspect there's some hesitation to go there, at least in this phase. But we need to go there. We need, because this is dialogical. It's a communion, which Christians talk about. This. Anyway, I'm not going to go into all that detail, but that's a whole nother chapter.
You're absolutely right, and it seems like you're telling us that that wasn't addressed in the symposium. It's fascinating to me that people are grasping for evidence, physical evidence, and they're still in that sort of zone, that mindset. But yet you're introducing spiritual evidence. That's such a wide-ranging term. Yeah. That's another layer of evidence on top of physical evidence. So you would think that they would go to. That you're talking about the layperson's, the way the layperson might talk about it. It feels that more spiritual evidence is in the layperson's experience.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, clearly, it's present, but there's a struggle to articulate it, to integrate it. And so there's a huge amount of empirical evidence in our scriptures going back almost 4,000 years. But you have to commune with that evidence, because that evidence complies with the laws of consciousness that Gödel's theorem addresses. It's not boxed into axiomatic proof. that it's not designed because it's dealing with consciousness. And Gödel's theorem articulates the reasons for that. It's more probabilistic because our consciousness is developmental. It expands. So I like Garry Nolan's analogy. We're like angry monkeys because our consciousness is self-contained, self-enclosed into a defensive posture of, I call them anxiety-containing identities that we're defending with that animal instinct of the angry monkey, that if we go out of that anxiety-containing identity, we're going to get discombobulated and feel that we're being attacked and even kill others. We become violent. And that's the ontological shock that the government's concerned with. That you have to manage it. It's a therapeutic alliance you need to develop with the culture, because the government is a father figure. You have to, but the father figure today is totally distrusted, and they're constantly demonizing. So you can't develop the therapeutic alliance with a government that everyone's demonizing.
Yeah.
So you're in a gray zone, and so they can't disclose further because you have to get there so that they can manage the ontological shock that they feel they can't manage because it's not the therapeutic alliance isn't there,
and they don't know what they're managing anyway. So
I wouldn't. When I listen to Colonel Nell, he definitely I think knows what the issues are. Yeah.
You mentioned father figure. I wonder, do you think Colonel Nell sits in that sort of bracket at the moment?
I didn't mean him personally. I meant government as a entity that takes certain responsibilities for the people.
Caring,
to care, which he articulates very clearly.
Yeah.
We are here to defend threats, again, both domestic and foreign. That's their function. They're elected for that.
And Colonel Nell did a talk, but you were saying he had a really interesting subject matter. You were talking about meaning, and how not a lot of people were looking into the meaning, but his talk seemed to have some meaning behind it. He was Can you explain a bit about his talk and what themes he was bringing in with it?
Well, I find Colonel Nell often is a bit ambivalent. I think it seems to be intentional, of course, because you're managing ontological shock, so it's a controlled disclosure. So you can't be explicit. It's progressive. So what was not always clear to me is how much is he conscious of what he's saying. Is everything that he said totally premeditated, or is there's an unconscious element that's influencing his decisions to say what he says? Because that applies to all of us, including him. So there's this transcendent memory that St. Augustine talks about that we all have, speaking of our consciousness, that we're not paying attention to. But it happens despite ourselves, even though we don't pay attention, we make choices. So there's this influence, a transcendent influence and a narcissistic influence. So they're at war with each other. It's all covered in scriptures, of course, all this dilemma. So when Colonel Nell comes what he chose to talk about this time, it's called, he calls it, my memory isn't always that great. That's my transcendent memory is much better. What the 5 good Roman emperors reveal about UAP disclosure. Okay, very interesting title.
Yeah.
So there's historical evidence of them describing this phenomenon. And
sorry, just quickly for people that haven't seen the talk, what was that evidence? Just so we can tie that into.
Do you remember? I've heard so much evidence.
I
can't remember which one applies to which one.
No, I don't know. But those 5 kind of emperors, kind of golden age of Rome, that had insights into this, where there was freedom of the people of expression, freedom of speaking without fear of being ridiculed. So
and that was he gave it.
Yes,
I think people can watch back. I think there was re-records that the Sol Symposium
they will come out.
Okay,
they will come out.
Okay.
So to answer your question, my wife's my down-to-earth memory, and she's so helpful. I have this subliminal message that I hear him saying, that moral clairvoyance of what the ultimate meaning, and so that's where it's not always very clear to me how much is conscious of what he's saying and how much is actually premeditated. It's specifically by choice. So for me, it's very interesting. First, he makes the evidence connections between these emperors who have witnessed UAP phenomena, and he chooses this because they were good emperors, which the subliminal message is the witnessing is connected to the goodness. You see, we're back to that biblical tradition. It's all, the evidence all throughout Scripture. We're not paying attention.
That's in the title. That's not too subliminal, isn't it? So
but see, I'm looking at the choice of the title. See, a person made those choices.
Yeah,
it's not just a title in space like that on its own. Someone made the choice of the title, okay, and brought it together. 5 good emperors who witness UAP phenomena, okay, and they made good decisions because they're the ones we know who witnessed these experiences. I mean, isn't this biblical parallels, of messages we're getting from elsewhere, a burning bush experience, all of this lingo that we're not paying attention to. So just the title. But then I looked at the number 5, ancient Hebrew numerology that the prophets used. There's symbols and everything that they're using that has deeper meaning, because the emotions is the language of the heart that moves by seeing those perceptions that are not just linear, they're circular, they're relational, and depend on our choice to pay attention. So the number 5 in ancient Hebrew numerology is a symbol of grace, of a transcendent force that gives us the power to do certain things in our consciousness. Well, what did David go to collect when he slew Goliath? He went to the river to collect 5 stones, not 4, not 3 or 6, 5 stones, because the 5 is the symbol of grace, of this transcendent power, that connection that he had. He was the one the prophet chose that would become king. See, he was the runt. Everyone rejected him because he had that moral clairvoyance. You see, that was within him. So he had that grace, and so that's just one example, the number 5. But then he lists 7 items, not 8, not 10, not 4, 7. 7
Colonel
is
Nell.
a number. Colonel Nell that's the symbol of spiritual perfection. So you get, you call it synchronicity or whatever you want to call it. These things happen.
Quite amazing.
That there's other things that are pulling these correlations together that keep repeating themselves.
Fascinating.
Like empirical evidence again, see.
What did he draw a conclusion to at the end? Was there...
That I don't remember.
She doesn't remember. I'm not going to...
Okay, yeah. But overall, you got the feeling that it just seems like a very different way of approaching, or a very different. Why would he? I mean, he's had to put a lot of thought into this, doing a talk in this way. There's a lot of. He kind of maybe we'd love to know why he chose that topic.
Yes,
but it seems to me that he's trying to demonstrate that encounters with UAPs can be beneficial, and how they've been beneficial to the ruling classes. So he's injecting meaning into his talk. So he was talking. Is that right? Can I say?
Well,
can
he
you say that?
contrasted it a bit to today's society and climate. So those 5 golden era rulers created a whole societal climate of freedom, ability to think maybe like they're trying to think there. And he also gave that contrast. But again, I have to say, I don't remember all the details, but you came away with, the bigger picture in a sense, because you have people who've had such strong experiences, and the entourage around them is not listening, they're getting demonized, but you have the whole UAP group now who also thinking they're a little bit like Angry Monkeys as a group, because people are still not listening to them, even though they have all this evidence, even more evidence that was presented. So,
And you got to say hi to Colonel Nell at the end, I hear.
Well, I'm very Swiss in my cultural influence, and I don't like to intrude and push myself on people, and so I never, unless it happens, I don't try to absolutely make it happen. Well, I mean, my hand was a little bit forced with the questions, which normally I allow. The word du jour is synchronicity, to allow things to happen for me, but I know we also have to participate and shake the apple tree to make the apples fall. So I can be good at that when I have to. But there was an opportunity there. I saw I could just shake his hand and thank him for his control disclosure last year at the Sol conference, because it really triggered me to start a podcast and to pause my book writing for what the next Reformation needs to look like, which I was working on, because now I realize it has to include all of this as well, and to be integrated. So,
but I think you're probably the only one who brought it up, and he thanked. I only was listening just behind, but he thanked Kelly graciously and said, "Yes, this is a conversation that we continue to have to push and to have." So that was also nice affirmation.
Yeah. He said he needed to hear that affirmation.
Yeah.
He's a human being. We all need that affirmation. That not the axiomatic proof. It's the Gödel's theorems type of affirmation. It's probabilistic. So even Jesus, needed that affirmation when he heard the voice of his Father, that experience he had, that he was on the right track. He's fully human. So witnessing these transcendent connections that we have with what he says was his Father, and which is our Father. But we're the prodigal sons. We need to eat amongst pigs to finally realize that something in this world that we're doing is not right. Go back to the source.
But it must have been quite heartwarming for you to have a little bit of interaction with him, and for him to be humble and to...
Well, yeah, just a moment.
Yeah.
The one with trying to speak to Jacques Vallée was quite frustrating, because I had the pressure of all these. I met all these Italian people, and when I shared, my experience with Eugenio Siragusa in my 47 years ago. It just they wanted me to ask this question to Jacques Vallée, because he's mentioned in his book, Messengers of Deception, which was actually part of the investigation 47 years ago when I had him arrested. The police department shared to me after their investigation. He comes up with The Morning of the Magicians. This is the book that has influenced Siragusa's deception.
Well, they found it in its library when they were collecting
They seized
evidence.
all his messages and all of this thing to try to understand how he manipulated. And so there was that in there. So I wanted to ask Mr. Vallée, does he have any updates of that phenomenon that he studied so many years ago in the context of, what I'm sharing now? I kind of wanted to ask that question. I never got the opportunity, and so I had these Italian, sometimes they were walking around, and there's noise, and he has,
so
I think, a hearing aid, he can't hear, and so the Italian guy was, "Ma guarda, è sordo, non ti sente parlare." Lo so, purtroppo è così, and I respond,
He can't hear, he can't hear.
I can't hear, so I just... But then he joined the Swiss discussion group on Signal that was made available from the Sol conference, and I just got a response from him. I sent him my video that was actually triggered by Ross Coulthard. I had some initial correspondence with him, and he noticed that I said, I explained to Ross what happened at the time, and he heard that I said, well, I still think he experienced something, even though I had him arrested. And he said, so Ross kind of, you see, it's dialogical.
Yeah.
It triggers this information that comes out of me when someone asks. So if they ask, I respond, and I started reflecting. I have all these years of research, and I should, what are the scenarios? How I then and now, and how do I view it now after all my education? So I created 3 scenarios, and of course, in the first scenario, I get very emotional because I don't want to repress my feelings. So I want to be in tune to have that perception, because if I repress my feelings, I lose the perception. And so, of course, when I'm narrating the experience, the pain just wells up, and I don't want to repress it. Well, actually, you tried to cut it off. I said, no, leave it. It's okay. It's real. It's authentic.
Well, that in that action, that was a bit of a trigger for me. That really made me understand how that you're listening to your feelings, and we shouldn't repress them, because then we'd be repressing things we should be listening to.
You got it. See,
yeah.
So that's the dialogue. It triggers. It inflames. And I get inflamed, and I say things like, "Where does that come from? How do I know all those things?" And then she reminds, "Come on, you've had so many years of research and studies. Where do you think it comes from?" Well, I don't know. I don't remember. How do I make the connection? See, because it's a communion.
Yeah.
We're communing.
So did you get a sense of communion in any way in the symposium? Because you've had a bit of interaction, but did you feel that people were a bit more on your wavelength, or did you have that kind of feeling?
Well, I think those young German men who sought you out after hearing your questions and they're like, oh, these are questions we have. We never hear anyone talking about them. Can we talk to you? I think that's one. Yeah. It didn't happen that often, but there are people.
Psychologist saying she picks those things up. Yeah.
At any rate, those were people who were, interested in going deeper. So,
or can I ask a different question? Did it change being there? Did it change your mind about anything? Was there anything that popped up that you weren't ready for, that made you think in a different way?
I like it when those things happen, but unfortunately, I'm not surprised. I like to be surprised.
Yeah.
Sure. But no, it's unfortunately the emphasis is on whistleblowing and the phenomena, and there was some dialogue, so that was good, but not enough. And that would be I would that's where I would organize, of course, for what's important to us, is the dialogue. So for others, they want the proof, but it's been around a long time, this thing, and we need to move beyond the proof. And if the others, because when people want to deny, they're going to deny, no matter how much proof. There's people who still believe we didn't go on the moon, so don't waste our time on that. And unfortunately, most people are like that. It's a narrow gate. Remember, we had this conversation. This is old stuff.
That's true. I think that was the surprise for me. Again, being more of an outsider, how so much of their talk is still trying to convince people. And in fact, once, if not twice, some of the announcers or speakers said, well, in reality, everything we're speaking about here is not for people in this room, you're already convinced, is for people who didn't come, you see. So they're still looking at this kind of empirical evidence, which many people are still finding, but they're again missing that personal element. And we spoke with many people in the coffee times who were really frustrated that there wasn't more time to talk and have dialogue. And they're like, even the question time's 10 minutes for 400 people. So we're here to talk, but there's again, by design, there's not that much space to talk. A 10-minute coffee break, 15-minute coffee break's not that much time, and you've got to seek people out. So a lot of people were saying, no, it needs to be designed differently. You know, you have all these great speakers here. Why not have an afternoon of breakout rooms where 20 people can sign up, have an intimate discussion with these people instead of this, again, kind of from the front, all interesting, fascinating, but impersonal in that sense. So I don't know how you...
No, yeah. I mean...
But there were several frustrated people that...
Yeah. So, several frustrated people came up to me and wanted more dialogue.
Yeah.
And Peter Skaffish, the co-founder of the Sol Foundation, says, "No, we need to talk more with experiencers." And he said, "But where? It's not happening." So I went up to him, gave him my card. You know, I'm an experiencer, 1990, and changed my life. And left Swiss banking and became a hermit for 35 years or something. So,
I don't know.
A research junkie, you know, love of learning.
Not a complete hermit, but it's certainly a research junkie.
So
he wants to interview experiencers. He said, so we'll see where the follow-up is. Yeah, he made a call for that from the front. So
great.
Yeah.
So you feel it was worth it?
Totally worth it going. Yeah. It was interesting getting a feel for the whole community, especially with those who are spearheading the whole
and
thing.
you meet all kinds of people, and some very interesting people. And somehow someone recognized my wife Dawn as someone otherworldly.
This was so bizarre. I mean, this was my encounter. No, it was just too funny. I was out at the coffee break talking with a couple of people, and this man comes over to our little group, and he looks at me very serious, and he says to me, "I'm very convinced that you are a Nordic."
Alien.
Well, Nordic alien. I was like, I mean, how do you respond? So I had this quick mental gymnastics, and all I said was, well, I guess I'll take that as a compliment. It was like, what do you say to someone?
But that
I mean, it was so bizarre, if I could say. So now I'm his Nordic alien.
Yeah, I'm calling you're my Nordic alien. And I'm the angry monkey.
Yeah, he's the angry
and
monkey.
we have a hybrid son who's angry monkey Nordic alien.
Anyway, it was one of those kind of bizarre moments, like, yeah.
It must have been a nice experience.
Oh,
kind
it
of
was
interesting.
fun.
It's better a Nordic alien than an angry monkey. I would take it as a compliment.
No, it was one of those, the two men that I was speaking to, we kind of chuckled, but that guy wasn't laughing. I was like, are you, just being funny? Or, okay, I have blonde hair. But anyway, it was one of those goofy moments. You're like, only here when something like that happens.
But that makes life interesting.
It made it so much fun.
The meaning behind that, the unconscious meaning, it's interesting.
Obviously, you're not going to forget it, are you?
No. We're making jokes about it all the time. Remember, I'm the Nordic alien here. So.
Brilliant.
But all that said, we did meet a lot of people who were interested in the idea of consciousness, higher meaning, people who had companies who focused on this, psychologists who graciously gave me their card. We're going to be in contact. And even on the breakout signal group, there's like 40 people Zoom who are chatting, talking, wanting to work with this. So there's a desire and a hunger to speak about it, but not overtly dealt with at the conference.
Yeah, and you can understand that because people are still, really getting in trouble if they're speaking out.
Oh, totally.
Mm-hmm.
So
totally.
It's very understandable.
They get in big trouble. They lose their whole livelihood and, yeah.
So it's triggered me to wonder who's my audience? You know,
Yeah.
I mean, I know academia is part, lay person is part, but I'm beginning to wonder maybe my audience should be the Christian audience, because my primary audience, I've been thinking, is the ufology community. But if they're not wanting to go in that conversation that Colonel Nell and apparently the legacy group would like us to go for more disclosure, maybe I should go to the Christian audience, which I always thought was my secondary audience, because what I have to say, you know, there's a lot of ontological shock for the Christian audience, you know, because they see a kind of a demon behind every bush, you know, and so all of this, what they don't understand and haven't integrated in our Christian faith yet, it's all demonic.
Gets demonized.
I wouldn't say all of them are like that, but there's a pretty big chunk of it. And obviously, if the legacy group is all Christians, according to Elizondo, who complains about that, and I think Nick Pope is another British one who kind of quotes that as if it was a problem. They obviously are not having this Christian problem that some in the wider Christian audience seem to have, that with what they don't understand, like the Pharisees, you know, they said Jesus is demonic, you know, because they don't understand it, because their faith is formulaic, and consciousness doesn't apply to formulas, you know, and so they haven't made that leap. So maybe I should address that Christian audience to help them understand there is not a demon behind every bush. There's just a demon behind every second bush. So to help them make that leap.
Well, if 1/3 of the angels fell, there you go.
Yes, it's every second bush, not every bush. So don't put all the angels in their category. So I have a close friend who was in that category, influenced, kind of almost brainwashed by that aspect to play it safe. You know, like the one who buries his talent under the parable, under the ground, just to play it safe. No, you have to stretch. If you want to expand your consciousness, you have to have some ontological shock to your worldview. So I just told him, okay, so you say they're demonic, and so what if the archangel Michael comes to you and you call him a demon? So how are you going to deal with that with your conscience? I see your point. Yeah. Okay, so it's every second bush. Just remember that, not a demon behind every bush. So,
it's encouraging.
Yes.
But it does feel like you're right. We need to take risks, not only in looking for different answers, but in challenging ourselves and our worldview. I think it sounds like a lot of people in the Sol Foundation need to take risks which they're not taking. And that would apply to all of us, I guess, in stretching ourselves.
Yes, yeah.
But
that personal stretching, I mean, going public with some of it will be devastating for their life or their livelihood, because even solid researchers are presenting things and getting rejected from journals. You know, there's this whole, you know, even with all the empirical evidence, very well done, they're rejected. But that doesn't mean personally, and then with groups like this where you don't have to convince, that you can have these deeper dialogues to encourage one another to look at the meaning. Because even the first night we were there was kind of a meet and greet, and we were chatting with some people, and I said something about cross-cultural shock, and two of them were like, oh, you don't really believe that's going to happen. People believe this. Then these are two scientists, and they're saying, no, I don't think that's an issue. And I've been looking at them like, wow, you know, you've kind of, even if you just say cultural shock, don't use ontological shock, as if it doesn't happen. There's so much even empirical evidence of the simplicity of normal cultures, let alone dealing with things interdimensionally. I was actually taken aback. I thought, whoa, you know, and you're here? it was a bit of a surprise, but also, I think, I don't know what percentage of people thought like these serious scientists. One was a physicist, another one. I thought, wow, they don't even want to go there. They brush it off as something that, doesn't really happen or exist, or certainly wouldn't happen to them. So it was a very sort of telling conversation, I think. So.
Yeah, and there is a willful denial of reality.
Yeah.
And if that's what people want, they want to deny reality, they're not going to force it on us. They're not going to impose on it. They're not going to give us too much proof, just enough to spur us along.
Invite us.
Invite us.
I think.
Yeah. It's an invitation, not an imposition. Our Maker is not a tyrant. If he's a God of love, you don't force someone to love you. It's pretty basic conservation laws throughout the universe. Colonel Nell talks about. So no one mentions that.
No one mentioned that.
Are there conservation laws in there? I mean, this control disclosure that he made last year, it's just amazing how it's not developed and discussed, and it's astounding.
Yeah.
And that's by decision. People don't want to go there. And so the legacy group withdraws. We don't want to see it. And so it's sad, very sad. I think that's what I get so emotional in that video. There's that time, I'm weeping, and I don't know, something was moving me so deeply. That's the struggle of humanity. They don't want to see what's so beautiful.
Yeah. Well, hopefully in making these videos, you're enabling people to have that dialogue and to go a little bit further. Yeah. And it certainly seems like you've made a step now, reaching out to everybody at the Sol Foundation.
Yeah.
But we're certainly encouraging people to engage.
Yeah.
Because we're not going to get anywhere without that, are we?
Exactly.
There's so much pain by people who feel this reality, and it's denied. And I think that's partially why they want to have, Garry also wants to have this empathy for whistleblowers who are struggling with this. There's a reality and people aren't paying attention to, and they're suffering for speaking about it and wanting answers. So it's this torn dilemma which I think the legacy group are finding themselves in. On the one hand, they would like to disclose, but then they have to think of the bigger pictures. It's a horrible situation to be in. And I think partially Colonel Nell was trying to communicate this difficulty that they had, that big, huge responsibility, and somehow the governments, managed to keep this quiet.
Well, they keep blaming the U.S. government, but then we had French scientists, French military people saying they have it as well, or we have the Israelis speaking out. They keep focusing on the U.S. holding it down, but it seems to me that everyone's holding it down. So there's this international consortium of quietness. Why aren't they all talking about it as well? It's in fact, we've seen these spread maps of where all the sightings have been all over the place, and they have so much scientific evidence. It's all over the world. So it's an interesting conspiracy of silence. International.
When I listen to Ross Coulthart, he's kind of one of the leaders of the charge to demonize the legacy group holding all of this back, and but he is, when he's listening to all of this, I see change in him. I see him starting thinking of spiritual things. He shares that personally sometimes, that there's something more going on. That he's had this kind of, as he entered this subject, he's had this big kind of reversal, in his own personal experience as he's discussing this situation. And that's happened to other people too. So, of course, I even see it in Jake Barber, when he's on one-on-one rather than his public setting, he shares that there's something spiritual going on.
Yes.
So you see this kind of little buds are happening. But of course, from our perspective, it's not happening fast enough. And that seems to be the stance the legacy group is taking. If I, pay attention to what Colonel Nell just recently said is taking place.
But what's interesting, in light of that, the very last speaker, and and I'm thinking of, it's nice that the conference ended on this note. When Jeff spoke about and he got teary when he was speaking too, his own experience, and then the pain of meeting for him ex-military people who are really living on the street, and mostly because everything was stripped away from them because of their witness to whoever they spoke to or weren't supposed to. I don't know all the details of that. But he wants to help these people and be with these people and be an advocate for these people. I mean, all the people stood up and clapped for him as being brave for doing this. So interestingly enough, that was at the very end. You had all of this empirical evidence, yet you had the whole audience being so moved for his transparency in his own pain and his desire to, uphold these people and give them a voice and tell them that they're not alone. So the compassion he had was really felt by the crowd. So that's encouraging. I think they really were moved by it. So,
and maybe controlled disclosure is working then. Maybe that's the way it's got to be.
At least those who have ears will hear, right, and respond.
This human nature has been around a long time, and despite our technological progress, I think the barrier for space travel will always prevent us from really going beyond this planet until we reach a certain level of consciousness to be able to do it. And if we don't, we'll have self-destroyed ourselves long before getting to that stage, unfortunately. Yeah. But Colonel Nell talked about a conserved quantity, a natural selection process, and that's another ontological shock people don't like to hear. God's love is unconditional. There's no condition. Well, you look at reality around us. There's evolution. Certain species disappear, others prosper. It's not that much different with consciousness.
It's true. They all, in general, you get the feeling that they want to think of whoever the UAP are, it's all benevolent. So hence you're like, well, what about these people who have been experimenting? You have so many witnesses of very negative things. But you see this kind of movement, even with the psychologist group, they don't want to talk to people who have been abducted, only kind of nice experiences. And to me, again, it's this pushing off of there is evil and there's benevolence. And many people don't want to see that or discuss it or try to understand it. And I think it has to do with what Kelly's talking about.
Yeah, I agree. Maybe that's a good place to wrap it up.
Yeah.
I think you've been really insightful about the Sol Foundation Symposium 2025. Let's see if there's any change in the next one.
Yeah. See, the mood has changed. It's the closing mood. What had to be said is said. We don't need to say anything more. You just feel it. Good. See, you pick up on it. Yeah, great. Thank you.
Thanks so much, guys.
Thanks.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
And thank you who listen.